On the day I graduated from Ohio State, I got my draft notice. And so I had 30 days to report to the Army. And I said, well, I've got a pilot's license and I've got my degree. Maybe I can get into an officer flight program. And I did in the Marine Corps. And 3 years of flight training and so forth, I really thought I would miss out on Vietnam because they had already brought back a lot of the guys by 1972 from, a lot of the infantry had been moved out. But they wanted to start a new bombing campaign, and our squadron was transferred from Iwakuni, Japan, to a small base, a deserted Air Force base in Thailand called Nam Phong. And we flew missions in A6 jets, bombing missions for close air support for Marines that were still on the ground around the DMZ, and flew night missions up in the North Vietnam along the roads to stop some of the traffic coming down with ammunition and so forth from the North Vietnamese.
Don Eggspuehler is a Vietnam War vet. He flew missions from Cambodia into Vietnam. While he was stationed in Southeast Asia, he would write to his mother, and she kept every single letter. Now, decades later, Don has put those letters into a book, Letters to Mom. This is a great firsthand look at what Vietnam aerial combat was really like, what it was like to live under incredibly primitive conditions in Cambodia, and a look at the life wisdom that could emerge from fighting an incredibly unpopular war. Please welcome Don to Bump in the Road. Don, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Well, hi, Pat, and I'm really happy to be on your show today. And, my story is I grew up in a small town in Iowa called Iowa Falls, about 5,000 people. And it's a wonderful place to grow up as a kid. And I went with the same kids from kindergarten all the way through high school. So we were a very close knit group of kids in our class and the whole community, really. After high school, I went to the Ohio State University to go to college. And I was lucky enough while I was at Ohio State to take flight programs and get my pilot's license. And I played in the rock band and just loved college, actually. But that was during the roughest years of the Vietnam War. And we were all worried about getting drafted, of course. Actually, we'd been worried about that back in high school.
Yeah.
So on the day I graduated from Ohio State, I got my draft notice. And so I had 30 days to report to the Army. And I said, well, I've got a pilot's license and I've got my degree. Maybe I can get into an officer flight program. And I did in the Marine Corps. And 3 years of flight training and so forth, I really thought I would miss out on Vietnam because they had already brought back a lot of the guys by 1972 from, a lot of the infantry had been moved out. But they wanted to start a new bombing campaign, and our squadron was transferred from Iwakuni, Japan, to a small base, a deserted Air Force base in Thailand called Nam Phong. And we flew missions in A6 jets, bombing missions for close air support for Marines that were still on the ground around the DMZ, and flew night missions up in the North Vietnam along the roads to stop some of the traffic coming down with ammunition and so forth from the North Vietnamese. And I came back from Vietnam pretty bitter, to be honest. We had lost 7 of our guys in our squadron, got shot down. And 2 more buddies that I went through flight school with who were on the Coral Sea, the aircraft carrier in the Gulf of Tonkin. they got shot down as well. So I didn't really talk about Vietnam very much for for years to my friends or family. And then I went back up to Iowa to visit my mom 6 years later, and I'd already had two little girls, was married, had a job in Dallas, and I was in computer software. And I was just talking with my mom because she had cancer, and that was kind of why I wanted to bring the girls up to be with her one more time. And I just asked her kind of offhanded, Mom, did you ever save any of those old letters? And she says, Oh, yeah, I've got them all. And they're in a box in the attic. And I went, Wow, I really would like to reread those myself. And when I did read them again, I really got some closure about my feelings and my bitterness. And, you know, because it was really a lot of good times we had in the military. And we made a lot of great friendships, especially when we went into combat. You really form a close bond with these guys. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to take the very best of each letter because most of them were handwritten and kind of hard to read. And I had a few tapes from the missions and so forth. So I thought I'd put the best part of these letters in a book for my mom for a Christmas present. And it was the best gift I ever gave her. And then she died the next year, and I got the book back, and it just sat in my closet for over 40 years. I got it back out, and I reread those letters again, and I thought, this might be helpful to other Vietnam veterans that have gone through PTSD or people that haven't even been in the military and want to know what it'd be like to go through boot camp and flight school and into combat. So I published it this last November, and it's been a fun experience because I've really gotten a good reaction from most of the people that have read it. They really enjoyed it because it was there. It was while it was happening, and I would have never remembered a tenth of this stuff if I hadn't written the letters to my mom. And again, she saved them. So I have to give her credit that that's the reason for the book is because she saved all this information. And then I put it down on paper with a typewriter. So that's my story. I was married for 23 years. My first wife, she got brain cancer and died after a year of fighting it. And I wrote a book called Star Benchwarmers, which was to my children. Uh, this was about 14 years ago that I wrote that book. And it's about her battle with cancer. And I've been retired for about the last 10 years. So this has been my hobby is to write about my life and my childhood and uh, my hometown. Published a book about my hometown and the history of the original settlers and so forth. Because we were never taught the history of Iowa Falls back when I was a kid. We were just taught general U.S. history.
Hmm.
And so that's been my passion really for the last 10 years is writing and trying to put the reader in the moment, right there when it's happening. And so they can relate to it a little bit better. And it doesn't really read like a history that way.
Oh, no, it's a very first-hand account of what it was like to to get into aviation, which you were so lucky you were chosen to be able to get your pilot's license with the Marines and everything. Did you always get the plane you wanted? What was your training course like with the Marines?
Well, I was lucky because I'd already been through a lot of this training in college.
Yeah.
I understood navigation charts and how to talk on the radios and how to handle an airplane. It was just faster and bigger airplanes is what it amounted to. And the top people in flight school got their choice. And I was one of the top two in my flight class, so I got to pick A6 jets. Most of the Marine aviators flew helicopters because they're in supporting the troops on the ground. We were doing dive bomb missions to support troops and to take away tanks or take away ammo dumps or whatever it was. And a lot of the trucks coming down the roads at night, bringing more ammunition and food and so forth for the North Vietnamese who were invading South Vietnam. They were all over the DMZ.
For those night flights,
So
this was before GPS. How did you go about targeting the areas you wanted to target?
uh, what we would do is we'd fly in from Thailand and we would talk to what was called a FAC, a forward air controller. And these were Air Force guys. In They were in a high-powered twin engine prop plane right down on the treetops almost.
Ooh.
And they could see what was going on and talking to the infantry guys, and they would tell us about the target and where the friendlies were around it so that we didn't drop any bombs close to
Yeah.
our guys. And then we'd always try to come in with the sun behind us so they couldn't see us as well. But we're rolling in at about 12,000 feet and in about a 45-degree bomb angle, pickling the bombs at about 6 or 7,000 feet, and then pulling off and pulling several G's because that's where you're the lowest, you're the slowest, and that's where most of the guys got hit, is at the bottom of their bomb runs. So again, you do what we call jinking, which is just changing direction quickly, and go back up and climb back up on top, and our wingman would be coming in right behind us and dropping another load. And the forward air controller, he would actually mark the target with a smoke rocket. He would roll in just over the treetops and shoot in a rocket, and he'd say, okay, bring it 50 meters to the east of my smoke. And so that's what we were aiming at, was his smoke target down there.
How do you
Uh,
develop
so
no, go ahead. No, I'm curious, how do you develop that skill of accurate bombing? Is this something you just train on?
Yeah, you practice it over and over and over again, uh, all through your flight training and with a squadron, of course. Um, the bombs today are so much more accurate. They have GPS positioning and they don't have to do a dive bomb pattern so much anymore. The bomb will go inside the size of a desk. Okay, that's how accurate they are now. And again, these were just dumb bombs, 500-pound bombs that didn't have any guidance except they would follow the path that we had run a dive bomb. So again, they weren't super accurate, but we would drop several bombs at a time so that we could get some coverage. And each 500-pound bomb would make a pretty good sized crater, about 25, 30 feet wide by about 20 feet deep. And that was probably the saddest part of flying over Vietnam in those days, is the whole DMZ area just looked like the surface of the moon because it had
Wow.
been bombed so much over the years. Kind of like Gaza looks now in Israel. It's just so bombed out, and it's very difficult, to live in that.
You tell a lot of really great stories about your time in Vietnam. What are some of your favorites?
Um, this is in the book, and it was my first night mission. And the night missions were a lot scarier because in the daytime you could see where you were going
Yeah.
and the dive bomb patterns and so forth and what was going on around you. But in the nighttime, we're all by ourselves, complete radio silence. Uh, we didn't want to be on the radios because they could track that with SAM, surface to air missiles. And so it was complete radio silence, strictly navigating by radars. And we would usually fly with cluster bomb units back then, following the roads up the valleys between the mountains. And you
At
really
night.
were on your own at that
I've
point.
flown at
And that
night in the mountains. It's not fun. It is really stressful.
It is. It was scary. And
No
that's
one
where we
was shooting at
lost.
me.
They would hear us go over the roads, and at
Uh-huh.
first they just try to shoot at us, but we're long gone by then. The problem was they started learning, hey, they're flying up the road. They'd call their friends, their buddies, about 3, 4 miles up the road, and they would get out and just start shooting straight up. And if you're flying at night, you don't even see that curtain of bullets. and you're flying along about 3,000 feet, about 300 knots, but still you can't outrun bullets. And again, if they got hit at night like that, under total radio silence, we didn't know it at the time. They didn't come back, and we'd have to try and find them the next day with search and air rescue and so forth. But most of them had flown right into enemy fire.
Did
And
you
again, those had a lot of fuel on board, a lot of
yeah.
bombs. If they got hit, it was usually a white flash, and it was over pretty fast.
Now, one of the things you wrote about was that Bob Hope came to one of your camps. Talk about, I remember those Bob Hope specials. They were great. I would think that having actually being there must have been amazing.
It was amazing. It was probably the highlight of the whole tour for all of us, because we had sent some pictures. I was on my day job. I was a special services officer, so I brought in rock groups and things like that, USO groups, into our little base in the middle of the jungle, and we sent some pictures of our base to Bob Hope. We really didn't figure that he would come all the way to Thailand to our base. But he got such a kick out of the pictures we sent him that, and we sent one that said, "We deal in junk," because we're trying to, out in the middle of the jungle, keep all these airplanes up and running. And he showed the pictures to his buddy, Red Fox. And Red Fox came, not only did they come to our base, but Red Fox flew all the way over there just to do our show because he liked that so much. And so we got almost a double billing, if you will, Red Fox and Bob Hope. And his wife came along, Dolores. This was his last Vietnam tour. Out of all the years of Vietnam, this was the last year of the war. And he was amazing. And his wife, Dolores, sang White Christmas at the end of the show. And 500 Marines were sitting there just crying their eyes out. It was an amazing show. It really was. He was quite a guy.
What other groups did you get in?
Most of them were Filipino rock bands
Mm.
or local talent that was traveling with the USO groups throughout Vietnam and Thailand bases and so forth. And it was the same with movies. We would share movies with Udorn Air Force Base, which was about 30, 40 miles north of our base, and bring in those movies at night. And the Seabees would watch them first. Those are the guys that were grading the roads and building our tents and things like that. They would watch them one night. I would get them from them, and we'd watch them for the rest of the Marines on the base, and then take them back to Udorn and pick up another movie. And we're just watching these out on the ground. We had a white a screen built on the mess hall, and kind of an amphitheater to sit on, and just watch the movies at night. Uh, and that was our entertainment because we weren't anywhere where there was any cities or anything like that were close by.
Did
We
it
were
cool
really
off
in
at
the
night?
job.
Did it cool off
Pardon
at
me?
Did it cool off at night?
Not really.
Oh man.
It was hot there. It was very hot and humid, well over 100 degrees most days. And actually, flying a mission was a couple hours of air conditioning, which was a relief. And the monsoon season in the fall, we did early fall. We hit what was the monsoon season, and it was almost comical because when the rain would start, you could almost set your watch by it at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it would rain just for a few minutes. So everybody had a bar of soap in your flight suit, or and when it started to rain, everybody would just strip down where they were on the base and take a quick shower because we didn't have running water. We
Oh,
had
you're
no
kidding.
showers. We had one hot meal a day that they fly the food in and cook it there. But it was very primitive. We were living in tents, 12 guys to a tent, no running water, no electricity. And you really start to realize how much you take all that stuff for granted. You don't even have a light to turn on at night to read. So it is, you just learn how to cope. And we did do a lot of drinking at night, with your buddies, because all we had to look forward to was flying another mission the next day. So again, it was just about as primitive as you can imagine. But we got through it, and it got better over time.
How did it get
The
better?
CPC, pardon me?
How did it get better?
Well, the Seabees kept continuously working. Those guys worked all night long, usually with the bulldozers, to bulldoze the streets for us. And then they finally, after they got tents for everybody, they started building little wooden huts that had a tin roof and screening around. Those were 10 times better because you got a little bit of air through the screens.
Oh,
And so it was a little cooler. And I had a little cot, just like you would have an army cot, and I had a little mattress on it, like a swimming pool mattress, and a mosquito net over that because we had to be careful about malaria because mosquitoes in the jungle were everywhere. So again, you just learn how to cope in a situation like that, um, and again, at least all that bombing that Christmas in Vietnam, they finally went to the Paris peace talks. They said, okay, we've had enough. And the Air Force, primarily, and the Navy had been flying in and really damaging Hanoi at that point. We were working more in the south part of North Vietnam in the DMZ area. But they did release the POWs that next year and went to the Paris peace talks and got our boys home. And after we were all gone, then they just reinvaded the country and took it over in a matter of a few months. So it was a shame. It was really a big waste that we all thought. And that was kind of why I was so bitter about the whole war. 55,000 guys had died, and for what? You know.
what was your experience like when you got back to the States?
Well, and that was another thing that was not good because the young people had been demonstrating against this war for a good 10 years at this point. Going clear back to when I was in high school and all through college, especially at Ohio State, there were lots of
Yeah.
protests. They were still protesting when I got home. And they were mad at us for going over, even for being part of the military. And all we were doing was just doing our job. But they were very bitter as well towards us. And we didn't get a big hero's welcome when we came home. They were spitting on our uniforms and shouting at us, and you almost didn't want to wear the uniform in a public place back then. So that was one of the saddest parts of Vietnam, I think, was all the veterans that came back, many of them wounded for life, uh, were welcomed back with just hatred. So we were very divided as a country at that time, which somehow we got through it all. And and I think that most of the Vietnam veterans just went on quietly with their lives, like I did, and tried to forget about it, tried to push those bad memories out of your mind. And I think that's what PTSD is all about, is you cannot get rid of those nightmares. You can't get rid of the horror that was going on over there. It just lives with you for the rest of your life. And some guys couldn't cope with it and either turned to drugs or something else or alcohol to make the dreams, the nightmares go away. My grandfather even had shell shock, they called it back then,
Yeah.
from World War I. He was a sniper in Germany, and they started putting the mustard gas everywhere, and he had shell shock, they called it, but it was really PTSD. We just didn't call it that back then. But he was never the same throughout his whole life. He became an alcoholic, and he had a rough life after that, which is too bad. But my dad was the oldest of three boys, and he saw what was going on with his father, and he decided, I'm not going to be like that. And he was a great father, and he had five kids. I was the oldest of five. So again, life goes on, and life is a series of life lessons that you'll learn. And
I think war gives you some pretty hard life lessons, though, don't you?
yeah, I think combat is one of the hardest life lessons of all. But I just happened to be one of the lucky ones that came back, and it really was just a numbers game. A lot of guys didn't.
What are some of the life lessons that come out of Vietnam for you?
Well, I I think I've always been proud of my serving my country, and I think anyone that went there felt that way. Uh, whether people agreed with the war or not, a military man doesn't have much choice. You know, you follow orders and you do your job. And at least I was trained to do my job. One of the biggest problems I had with Vietnam is a lot of young guys were drafted right out of high school, and they found themselves with a rifle in a jungle about 6 months later. And honestly, they really didn't have time to train them properly, if you can be trained properly for combat. And so again, that's what I probably resented more than anything is a lot of those guys I think were just sitting ducks in the jungle in Vietnam against very trained NVA troops. Uh, and we paid the price, 55,000 guys. It's tough.
Oh no, those times were terrible. I was just on the a little bit on the young side of Vietnam. So, I didn't, my friends didn't go fight, but I think the draft ended when I was, um, I'm going to say probably a sophomore or junior in high school.
Yeah. Well, and you know, thank goodness they did get rid of the draft because back then we didn't have any choice at all. At
No.
least now the guys on the list are going in because they want to join the military. So that's a big difference from when I was in.
Oh, it's a
The
huge,
interesting thing years is the families that lost a loved one and the wives and their children, they never get over it. It carries on and on and on with that family. And so it wasn't just the military guys that were killed, it was their families suffering through that and continuing to suffer through that and wondering what their dad was like. Uh, where did he get shot down? Did they ever find anything? And thankfully, there has been a group that has really, for the last 30, 40 years, have been sifting through a lot of the debris and dirt and mud and found a lot of the remains and sent them back to the states to the families, which I think was wonderful that they dedicated themselves to doing that. But that is the tragedy of war, that it affects so many other people besides just the people that are the combatants.
is there any wisdom to
Uh,
come out of that?
pardon me?
Is there any wisdom to come out of that?
Well, you would think as a country we've learned our lesson. But again, we've gone through several other conflicts, Afghanistan for almost 20 years.
Mm.
It seems that we need to be involved in a lot of situations around the world just to keep peace. But on the other hand, it seems also that we haven't learned our lessons from the ones that we've already been involved in, that we really can't solve all the world's problems by ourselves. It's not really our job to solve all the other problems around the world. But you see, you know, situations happen where dictators or other people try to take land away or take somebody's country away. And they're our allies, just like our allies were in World War I and II, and we need to support them. So far, like with Ukraine, it's been just a matter of sending lots of ammunition and weapons. And our boys haven't had to go there and
Oh,
fight.
Ukraine is a bottomless hole where everybody is to blame. Nobody has clean hands in that one. And I think that no matter what the outcome is, it is going to be just a disaster.
Yeah, it's already been quite a
Yeah. What do we
disaster.
have? 1.8 million Ukrainians dead? I mean, the death toll is beyond comprehension.
I know it is. It's a very sad situation.
You
Uh,
know, it's interesting what you're saying though about PTSD. My father flew in World War II. He did not have PTSD that I know of, but I can remember. But interesting story. He met a man, one of our neighbors actually, who was a bit younger than him, and that young man was growing up in Dresden while it was being firebombed. And my father had been part of that firebombing raid. And they tease each other a little bit, but nobody really talked too much about any of it. I've often wondered what he thought, you know, years later about being part of that raid. But as you're saying, you take off, you do what you're told, you do it to the best of your ability, or they're sending you back the next day. The 8th Army Air Corps during World War II had the highest casualty rate of any of the service arms. I don't know how in the world those guys managed to get up day after day and go fly again. I really don't.
oh,
But
they did.
how did you guys do it? How did you do it in Vietnam?
Like I said, you get used to it, and it really, you can't. You're concentrating so much on doing your job, and at the moment, you're totally 100% focused on flying the mission, flying the dive bomb patterns, getting out of there, dropping the bombs on target. And it isn't until afterwards, when you're flying home and it's all over, and you start to realize what you've just been through. Watching the flak go by and everything else, you just realize you've just been very lucky to get through that mission. And it was 10 times worse in World War II, like you're talking about, because those Germans were throwing up everything except the kitchen sink
Yeah.
at those bombers, 29 bombers that were really low, I mean, really slow.
Yeah.
And and
Have you ever flown in one? I flew in one. They are pigs in the air. Not only are they very rudimentary, they do not handle very well. I mean, they're just kind of, they just waft through the air. I can't, you don't have any sort of advantage flying one of those machines.
no, not really, because the only thing they would do is fly in formation so that they're
Yeah.
all in a tighter group so that, strength in numbers, kind of like why birds all fly together. And they had fighter jets. I mean, not fighter jets, they had fighters like P-51s and so forth back in World War II that would take on the Messerschmitts as best they could.
Hmm.
But again, there were some planes getting shot down. And those air crews were probably 10 guys on each airplane
Yep.
that were jumping out of those things on fire with a parachute. But and over enemy territory. They were over Germany. So again, some of them made it through.
Yeah.
Some of them were captured.
Although
But
if they limped back to England, a lot of them were landing with, engines out, bullet holes through the plane, people wounded on board. I mean, it was really not pretty.
no, and another thing most people don't realize, I read a great book. It's called Lucky. It was Lucky Luciano he was a pilot in B-29, and those things flew at about 30,000 feet with no heater.
Oh
Okay,
yeah, it
think
was
about that.
freezing
That was
cold. Yeah.
up there, and they wore the heaviest flight suits that they could find, leather jackets,
Gloves.
pants,
Yeah.
boots, but they were freezing up there for hours at a time just to get over the target and drop their bombs and then turn right around and go back to England to start all over again. So it was a really totally different than what I had to go through. And it's totally different now than what I lived through because now the weapons are so smart and they're, GPS accurate down to a few feet for a bomb. So they can put it on the size of a desk on the target area. And they don't have to even dive bomb anymore. They just let the bomb go and it will drive itself into that spot that they picked out. So it's much more sophisticated now. It's much more accurate than it used to be. And that is just a progression of the technology of not only the airplanes, but the weaponry and the pilots. So again, it's really just
And now
um,
we're moving to drones, it's an incredible world. If you look, as you look back at all this, if you could give a young person coming along today three pieces of usable wisdom, what would you say to them?
hmm, that's a good question. And you know, I think we start to realize, as I have now, I've been retired for 10 years, that everybody says life is short, but you don't realize that you only live about 25,000 days if you live to be 70. And you only live to be 30,000 days if you're 82 or so. So it's a very short amount of time that we're alive on this earth. And advice I would give is follow your passion. First of all, find something that you really enjoy participating in. And if that joy, if you can find that in your career, is just amazing. But if the military, if you're oriented toward that, I would say the same thing. Find something that you enjoy doing and something that might help you in a career after the military. Because both of my nephews, after high school, were kind of lost and they didn't have enough money to go to college. So I suggested that they go in the military. And one of them went in the Navy and became a nuclear expert on an aircraft carrier. And now he works in a nuclear power plant. Great job. And he learned that skill in the military. My other nephew was in the Air Force, special forces actually for a couple of years, but then he went into air traffic control and he had all kinds of job offers for air traffic control after he got out of the military. So again, these guys really made their whole career by being involved in the military in the first place. Now, I didn't stay in aviation after the military. I had all my pilot ratings and I took a few trips with the kids and stuff, but I really never was driven to be an airline pilot or anything like that. But a lot of my friends were, and they flew in the airlines for years. And so, again, it's just find what interests you and what your passion is in life, if at all possible, and then get the best training you can find, and you'll be successful. You'll be okay. No matter how crazy this world might seem to them, somehow things work out. And and then the other thing I'd say is it's not going to go always the way you want. Life isn't perfect. It is a lot of ups and a lot of downs, a lot of heartache, but a lot of love. And, just enjoy the moment while you can. Enjoy every day because we really do have a limited number of days. That'd be my advice, I guess.